I heard my own name used like a punchline, and that's the moment I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. It was a Tuesday evening in the parking garage, level B2, cold concrete smell, flickering fluorescent light near the stairwell. I'd gone back down to grab my laptop bag from the truck after realizing I'd left it on the back seat. My boots were loud on the ramp, so I heard them before I saw them. Randall Owens and Clyde Norris standing between two SUVs maybe 20 feet away, voices low but carrying the way sound does in an enclosed space. I stopped walking. Neil finishes the deployment. We move Wade in for the federal handoff. Clean transition. That was Randall, my direct boss of 4 years. "You sure the kid's ready?" Clyde asked. "He doesn't need to be ready. He just needs to be there with his name on it." Neil built the thing. Wade just has to stand in front of it. I stood there holding my keys for probably 30 seconds. Neither of them looked my direction. I turned around, walked back up the ramp, sat in my truck in the upper level, and stared at the dashboard until the fluorescent lights in the garage below started to feel like a different world entirely. My name is Neil Briggs. I'm 53 years old, senior systems engineer at Apex Field Systems. I'd spent the past 7 months rebuilding a $9.1 million federal contract from near total failure, working nights, skipping weekends, missing my son's soccer games. And I just found out I was also the exit ramp. Let me back up. Apex builds software for construction project management, the kind of systems that track budgets, compliance reports, inspection schedules, and labor hours across multiple active job sites simultaneously. Not the type of work that shows up in tech magazines. But when you're managing 6 federal construction projects across 4 counties, and those projects are federally funded, you need the software to run exactly right, or you start getting calls from people with government emails. 2 project managers before me had already burned through 14 months and delivered nothing that worked at scale. The client, a federal oversight group run by a supervisor named Hank Draper, was 2 weeks from terminating the contract and putting the work out for rebid. That would have cost Apex the $9.1 million plus whatever goodwill they had left in the federal sector. Clyde called me in on a Monday morning. Randall was already sitting off to the side when I walked in, arms crossed, watching. "Neil, you're the only one who understands this system end to end," Clyde said. "We need you to pull it back." I said I'd handle it. That was what I did. I always said yes, and I always handled it. 19 years in this industry, 9 at Apex. And I had built a reputation on being the guy who showed up when things were broken and left them running. What I didn't know that Monday morning was that Randall had already been positioning his son Wade for a role on the project. Wade was 28, smart enough, willing enough, but he had never shipped anything at scale, and he had no familiarity with the federal data format requirements that made this particular system complicated. I'd solved those problems myself over 3 consecutive weekends by building a calibration module from scratch to sync inspection data across all 6 sites in real time. It wasn't glamorous work. It was the kind of thing you do at 11 p.m. with a cold cup of coffee, because there's no other way to make the numbers come out right. Nobody else at Apex knew how that module worked. That wasn't by design. It was just how it happened when one person solves a problem alone. In those first weeks back on the project, I noticed Wade showing up at meetings he hadn't been invited to, standing near the whiteboard, asking questions that were a half step behind the actual conversation. I didn't think much of it. Some managers bring in younger guys to observe. I figured Randall was mentoring him, which seemed fine. Then one afternoon, I was walking past the main conference room and saw Wade at the front of the room with a printout of my architecture diagram, explaining it to 2 junior developers. He had some of it right, he had some of it noticeably wrong. I stood in the doorway for a second, said nothing, and kept walking. That should have told me something. It didn't register the way it should have. My mind was on the work. It usually was. My ex-wife Diane used to say that was the whole problem. And she wasn't wrong. We'd been divorced 2 years by then. My son Scott was 21, a junior at the state university 3 hours away. He played club soccer, and I'd promised him I'd make it to at least 1 home game that semester. I made it to 0. He didn't make a big thing of it. Scott doesn't make big things of anything, which is either a credit to his character or an indictment of how low his expectations had gotten when it came to me showing up. In the parking garage that Tuesday evening, sitting in my truck in the dark, I thought about Scott for the first time in weeks. I thought about the 14-hour days and the cold coffee and the 3 weekends I'd spent building that calibration module. I thought about what Randall had said. Wade just has to stand in front of it. Then I started the engine and drove home. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was panicking, more because I was thinking clearly for the first time in months, and the picture that was coming together wasn't one I could unsee. By morning, I had mapped out my options the way I would map out a broken system. You list what you have, what you don't have, and what the failure points are. Quit immediately. That felt satisfying for about 45 seconds before I remembered Scott's tuition bill and the fact that I'd been paying it alone since the divorce. Walk away clean but broke, with a gap in my resume and no leverage. Not a real option. Blow it up right now. Go into Clyde's office and lay out what I'd heard. That would get me fired before lunch with cause, and Randall would spend the next year telling every hiring manager in the sector that I was unstable. Half commit and let the project fail. I'd thought about that one longer than I should admit, but the system failing wouldn't hurt Randall. It would hurt Hank Draper's federal projects, and it would hurt the reputation I'd spent 19 years building. I wasn't willing to burn my own name down to settle a score. That left a fourth option: finish the job exactly as promised, document everything, and make sure the right person understood who actually built this system before anyone could swap me out. I chose the fourth option. The next morning, I started recording my daily check-ins with Randall. In this state, one-party consent means I don't need to tell him. I set my phone face down on the desk before he came in each morning, screen off and let it run. Randall checked in every day at 900 sharp. Same routine. He'd lean against the doorframe, ask how the calibration module was coming, say something that was meant to sound encouraging, and leave. I answered the same way every time: steady, on track, nothing to see here. That's my guy, he said one morning, and I watched him walk away down the hall and thought about how long he'd been saying that. Years. I'd always taken it as a compliment. I started keeping a log, not on company systems, on a personal laptop I brought from home. Every conversation with Randall, time-stamped. Every email where my name was absent from something I'd built. Every meeting where Wade was present and I was described as support. I wasn't building a legal case. I was building a record of what was real, so that when the time came, I wouldn't be relying on memory against two men with lawyers. About 2 weeks in, I started noticing the smaller things that I'd been too busy to register before. Wade began CCing himself on emails between me and the federal subcontractors. Not contributing anything, just inserting himself into the thread. One afternoon, I found a slide deck on the shared drive labeled Miller Project Leadership with Wade's name under the title and mine nowhere on it. I copied the file, noted the timestamp, and said nothing. Randall sent a company-wide email in week 3 thanking the team for their progress on the federal contract. He named 3 people. Wade was one of them. I was not. I read that email twice, closed it, and went back to work. Around that same time, I started having lunch occasionally with Pete Greer, the senior accountant. Pete had been at Apex longer than almost anyone, 11 years, and he had that quality some people develop after a long time in one place where they know exactly how the institution actually operates versus how management thinks it operates. We'd always been friendly without being close. I started steering our conversations toward things like project transition protocols and what documentation HR required for clean terminations. Pete was sharp enough not to ask why I was asking. The way it usually goes, he said one afternoon, picking at a sandwich, is that they decide first and document second. The paper trail gets built to support a decision that's already been made. So the protection has to come from somewhere else, I said. He looked at me for a second. It helps to have someone with standing ask the right questions before it gets to that point. Someone external. Someone whose buy-in the company actually needs. He wasn't telling me what to do. He was leaving a door open. I walked through it in my own time. The most important move I made came 4 days before the demo. I sent Hank Draper a direct email. No complaints, no politics, nothing that would read as an internal dispute, just a clean technical briefing. Architecture overview, calibration module documentation, a plain English explanation of the federal data format solution I'd built and why it mattered, and a clear outline of what the 90-day post-deployment window would require from a technical standpoint. I wrote it on a Saturday morning at my kitchen table. Took me 2 hours to get the tone right. Factual, detailed, the kind of document that shows without saying. Hank replied within 20 minutes. This is exactly what I needed. I'll have my team review it before Tuesday. See you at the site. He didn't copy Clyde. He didn't copy Randall. That was his choice, not mine. What I understood was that Hank Draper was a federal supervisor who had been burned twice already by this project and had no interest in being burned a third time. If someone sent him documentation that answered his questions and demonstrated competence, he was going to remember who sent it. That was all I needed. I closed my laptop, made another cup of coffee, and spent the rest of that Saturday doing nothing in particular. For the first time in months, I wasn't behind on anything. The work was done. The record was clean. The right person knew the right things. What happened next was just going to happen. Demo day was a cold Tuesday morning in November. The kind of cold that hits differently on a job site than it does in an office. You feel it through your jacket, through your boots on the gravel in the way the trailer door sticks when you pull it open. There's nothing soft about a construction site at 7 a.m., and I'd always liked that about field work. Everything is what it is. The ground is hard, the deadlines are real, and nobody is pretending. I arrived 40 minutes early. The AV crew was still running cables in the trailer conference room, and I helped them move a folding table to get the projector angle right. Small thing, but it put me in the room before anyone else, which was where I needed to be. When Hank Draper pulled into the site lot at 7:45, I was standing outside with a cup of coffee, and I walked over to meet him. We shook hands. His grip was solid, the kind that comes from years of actual site work before moving into oversight. "Good briefing you sent over," he said. "Glad it was useful," I said. That was the whole conversation, but Randall had walked out of the trailer right at that moment and heard every word of it. I watched his expression go through 3 different calculations in about 2 seconds. He nodded at Hank, smiled, and said good morning. Then he looked at me and said, "We should go over the agenda before people arrived." I told him I'd be right in. By 8:15, the trailer conference room had 9 people in it. Hank and 2 of his federal site supervisors on one side, Clyde and Randall at the head of the table. Wade sitting near the projector with a clicker in his hand, and a folder of printed slides in front of him. Pete hadn't come to the demo, but he'd texted me that morning. Steady, 2 words. That was enough. Clyde opened with remarks. He thanked Randall's team for their commitment and their resilience through a challenging project timeline. He mentioned the company's long relationship with the Federal Oversight Group and how much Apex valued the partnership. My name did not appear in any of those sentences. I sat with my hands flat on the table and listened. Then Randall introduced Wade as the technical lead on the project. Wade stood up, buttoned his jacket, and clicked to his first slide. He knew the material the way someone knows a subject they've studied rather than built. He had the vocabulary. He had the structure of the argument. What he didn't have was the instinct that comes from having actually solved the problem. And that instinct is the thing that shows up when someone asks a question you didn't prepare for. Hank let him go for about 12 minutes. Then he raised one hand. "Wade, walk me through the calibration module. Specifically how you handled the federal inspection format variance between the eastern and western site clusters." Wade stopped, looked at his slide. The answer wasn't on any slide, because I had never written it into a presentation. It lived in the code itself and in a methodology document I had written at 11 p.m. on a Sunday 3 months ago, single-spaced, 6 pages, the kind of documentation that exists because the engineer who built something wants to make sure it survives him. The room sat quiet. I counted to 5. Randall leaned forward slightly, about to say something. I could see him calculating whether to jump in or let Wade find his footing. The problem was that jumping in would mean admitting Wade didn't know, and letting Wade keep struggling would produce the same result in front of a federal supervisor. Either way, the answer wasn't there. I said, "Hank, you want me to take that one?" Hank looked at me directly. "Go ahead, Neil." Randall sat back. I walked through it from the beginning. The variance problem existed because the eastern cluster sites used a legacy federal inspection format that predated the current federal data standards by about 7 years. The western cluster had been updated. Getting them to sync in real time without data loss required a translation layer built into the calibration module that could recognize format version on intake and route accordingly. I tested 3 different approaches before landing on the one that kept latency under 200 milliseconds without dropping fields. I explained why the other 2 approaches failed and what that failure looked like in the output data. Hank asked 2 follow-up questions. I answered both without looking at any notes. He wrote something in his notebook and didn't look up when he said, "That's what I needed to understand." Wade sat down. He didn't try to add anything. To his credit, he didn't pretend to, which I respected more than I expected to. Randall tried to redirect the conversation toward the deployment timeline. I let him talk for a minute. Then I walked through the timeline myself in more detail, referencing specific site conditions that I'd accounted for in the scheduling that weren't in any of Wade's slides. Hank's two supervisors were leaning forward by then. One of them started taking notes. At the end of the presentation, Hank closed his folder, put his pen down, and looked at Clyde. Our contract requires stable technical leadership through full deployment and the first quarterly review. I need confirmation that the person who built this system will be overseeing the rollout. Clyde smiled his CEO smile. Absolutely. Neil is essential to this project. Then I want that formalized in the contract addendum before we execute today, Hank said, not a general statement. A named commitment. It was not a question, and Clyde knew it. Of course, Clyde said. We'll have language drafted this afternoon. Hank nodded once and stood to shake hands. Meeting over. The federal supervisors were already talking to me about site access schedules before Randall had pushed his chair back from the table. Clyde caught me in the gravel lot before I reached my truck. Randall was 2 steps behind him. Neither of them looked like men who had just closed a $9.1 million contract. They looked like men who had just lost an argument they hadn't expected to have. My office, tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, Clyde said. I'll be there, I said. I spent the rest of that afternoon with Hank and his 2 supervisors going over site access logistics and the 90-day rollout schedule. We stood around a folding table in the trailer with a site map spread out and talked through the practical realities of deploying across 6 active construction sites simultaneously. It was good work, the kind of conversation where everyone in the room knows what they're talking about and nobody is performing. I drove home that evening feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Solid, like the ground under me was actually there. The next morning I sat across from Clyde in his office. Randall was in the chair off to the side. Same position he'd been in the day Clyde had asked me to save the project. Full circle. Clyde got straight to it. What do you want, Neil? I'd spent time on this, not the night before. I'd been thinking about it for 2 weeks, ever since the parking garage. I knew what the old version of me would have asked for: a title, a corner office, a seat at the table I'd been sitting next to for 9 years without being invited to. But those things belonged to a version of this job I no longer believed in. 3 things, I said. First, formal lead on the full deployment with a completion bonus of $45,500 written into the contract addendum before I sign off on the Hank agreement. Clyde's jaw tightened. He nodded. Second, a written statement from HR confirming there is no active termination plan for my position. Pete Greer witnesses it and gets a copy. Randall shifted in his chair. Clyde cut a look at him that said, "Stay quiet," then looked back at me. Fine. Third, I said, 9 months from today I resign voluntarily. You provide a direct personal reference, and there is no non-compete clause in my exit paperwork. Nothing that restricts where I go next. Clyde stared at me for a long moment. You want to leave. I want to leave when I choose and where I choose, I said. There's a difference. He looked at me the way people sometimes look at you when they realize the conversation went somewhere they didn't plan for. Not angry. More like recalibrating. You could have a future here, Neil. What you showed today, that's exactly what this company needs. What I showed today is what I've been doing for 9 years, I said. The difference is that today the right person was watching. He agreed to all 3. I think part of him was relieved. I wasn't asking for his job or threatening a lawsuit. What I was asking for was clean and finite, and he was smart enough to take it. The next 9 months were the best stretch of professional work I can remember. Wade was pulled from the project quietly after 3 weeks. He couldn't hold his own in the technical reviews, and everyone on the federal side knew it within the first site visit. Randall got flagged in an internal audit 2 months later. Pete had been keeping records of the Wade situation longer than I'd known, documenting the nepotism angle with the same quiet patience he brought to everything. Randall survived that round, but his standing inside the company changed in the way these things change when the facts are on the table, and everyone has read them. I delivered the system on schedule, all 6 sites. Hank told me at the final quarterly review that it was the cleanest federal deployment his office had processed in years. He said it the way people say things when they mean them, not as a formality. I submitted my resignation the next morning. Hank had reached out 3 weeks earlier with an offer. Lead systems architect for his oversight group, managing technology implementation across a growing portfolio of federal infrastructure projects. The salary was substantially higher than what Apex had ever paid me. No non-compete in my exit papers. no complications. My last day at Apex was quiet the way last days usually are when you've already said what needed saying. I packed a coffee mug, a photo of Scott from his freshman orientation, and a spare charging cable. Pete walked me to the elevator and we shook hands. "You could have burned this place down," he said. "That wasn't the point," I said. The doors closed and that was it. The first weekend in my new role, I drove 3 hours to watch Scott play. Got there early enough to find a decent spot on the sideline. He saw me during warm-ups and jogged over to the fence. "You actually made it," he said. "I made it," I said. "We're not a family that makes big speeches out of things." He went back to warm up, and I stood there for 90 minutes in the November cold and watched him play. I didn't check my phone once, not once in 90 minutes. If you're a certain age, you understand what that means. A few weeks later, I got an email from Wade. Subject line, "Thought you should know." 3 engineers had cycled through the calibration module since my departure. None of them had gotten the sync latency under 400 milliseconds. Apex had lost 2 more federal bids. Clyde was dealing with board pressure. I closed the email without responding. Not out of bitterness. I just had nothing left to say to that chapter. If you've ever been the guy they counted on to fix what other people broke, the one who stayed late and asked for nothing but fair treatment, and then found out they were already planning your replacement before the job was done, you know exactly what this felt like. You know the parking garage moment. You know the 9 p.m. emails you answered on a Saturday. You know what it costs. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're at with it. I read every one, and if you know someone who needed to hear this today, send it to them. Sometimes the most useful thing one man can do for another is just say out loud that it happened to him too.